So what we're going to do is we're going to just do a real quick 1 minute introduction of who we are, kind of what got us here, sort of. And then a quick overview, and then we have some kind of opening thoughts as you think about this area of I'm gonna go back and forth between fundraising and revenue, because the traditional model of fundraising is, you go out and you ask people for money or you do an event, but there are so many other ways that nonprofits bring revenue. But I'll get into that. So first of all, a little bit about me. I am Dan Kimball, not Brent Riffel. And I've been in the fundraising space for over 25 years. I did not go to school for fundraising. Very few people do. I'm an FPU graduate in the early 90s with a degree in psychology because I wanted the degree that had the fewest units to graduate. Because my wife told me that she wouldn't go any further in a relationship unless I got a degree. So I went into psychology, and Dr. Ted Nichols said, you really won't go anywhere in a career if you don't get higher education, like go further. And I said, forget this. So I went to work for a nonprofit called Kingsview Mental Health Systems. I ran a drug and alcohol prevention program called Friday Night Live. And at the time, the money was reducing, and the program said, we need to figure out a different way to raise money. So I said, why don't we go and talk to the service clubs? Because it seems like they're always giving checks. So I made, in a period of about 3 or 4 months, I made appointments with every Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, Seroptimus club I could find in the phone book at the time, because there was no Google. And in a period of about 3 months, I raised about $75,000 for the program. They brought me in and said, you are now officially the fund development person. So that was my intro into fundraising. I then learned how to write a grant. I went down to the Fresno County Library because, again, there was no Google. And I read a book on grant writing, and we were doing assemblies for high school and junior high kids of 400 or 500 kids. And the grant said, hey, if you can get kids to wear a bike helmet, we'll give you $75,000. So I'm like, well, we're already talking about drugs and alcohol, so why don't we tell them to wear a helmet and not use drugs? So I wrote my first grant, we got it, and that's how I got into fundraising. Shortly after that, I got a job at Valley Children's Hospital, and I really cut my teeth into this, like, oh, there's professional people out there that do fundraising. Worked there for 8 years, transitioned out, worked for the Fresno Met in a major gift capacity, then Fresno State for 10 years in a capacity of foundation and corporate relations. 2015, I then transitioned to Aplos Software. Many of you guys use Aplos. I was hired basically as an in-house consultant to help them dream and develop the fundraising side of their software, the donor management. And then in 2021, we were in the middle of COVID, and I was just contemplating a lot of things, and so I started a consulting business, hence where I started working with Brent on 10 Talents. So I'm going to stop there and let Brent go.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. It's been a joy to work with Dan, as you can probably already imagine. So myself, I grew up kind of all in all these communities all over this valley. So I've grown up I've lived in 7 different communities. And so through time, I've just seen a lot of interesting and great things that are taking place all over the valley. When I was in 3rd, 4th grade, I met my wife. And so we ended up not getting married on the playground, but we ended up getting married later. And so I've known her parents just about as long as I've known mine. And so it's been really sweet to be a part of that family. We've been married for 31 years, have 3 daughters, and just enjoy life together. So going back into high school and even junior high, God did some incredible things in my life in junior high. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 7, but ended up later recommitting my life to Christ when I was a sophomore in high school, and it was because of Mexico outreach. And when I went to Mexico, God rocked my world. I got to see the heart and need of the world and came back just different. And so when I came back, everything was youth ministry. It was, I want to serve youth. I want to be a part of leadership in youth, and did a lot of that. And so really some of my nonprofit work came really in the church and starting ministries within our church in high school and seeing some of those ministries really kind of take off. And my heart was just to serve people and love people. So as you all know, youth ministry, it's all about raising money. You don't think about that, but When Dan was talking about that, I'm going, oh my goodness, you know. I went up to Multnomah Bible, I took some classes at Kings River Community College, and then went to Multnomah Bible College while my soon-to-be wife was going to school here. And so through that time, opened the door not only to the ag side of the world, and was working in the ag arena for a long time from 8th grade, kind of all through high school into college, and had this ag background. But also then later, I was like, well, I really want to go into the corporate world and kind of take this evangelism heart of mine into the corporate world, which I did for a few years, but then ended up going into youth ministry. And youth ministry out in Kerman, you know, it got back into fundraising again, and some different things were going on, and Phantom Fireworks booth was one of the top fireworks booths in the valley that we ran in Kerman. And we ended up raising close to $30,000 out of that one fireworks booth in Kerman. And so it just kind of started, how do we build partners? How do we build relationships? How do we love people more effectively? And how do we build ministry? So from there, ended up doing that for 10 years and then going into the financial services world for about 7.5, 8 years. That was an eye-opener because it connected me with people, connected me with businesses, attorneys, CPAs, and then I started seeing God start using all these pieces to come together. So later, not only going back into ministry at Clovis Hills Community Church for a couple years, but then going into the development space at Fresno Rescue Mission for 5.5 years was really the first opportunity I had to start saying, we got to raise $5.5 million for a women and children's shelter called Rescue the Children. And that was a joy. And then from there to Convoy of Hope, one of their first development officers with Convoy of Hope for 8.5 years. And then working with a private foundation during that time and helping vet organizations and distribute money all over the valley. Gave me some really key opportunity to say, what would it look like if we had a Christian community foundation for our valley that brought in resources that are non-cash, that we could then retain the tax dollars and then push it right back out into our kingdom ministries and organizations people love to give to. And so that's a snapshot of my world, and what a joy it's been to be working with a ton of different people, and great to be with all of you as leaders.
Cool. Oops. Okay, so as you guys already saw in the email, is the light, should we do the lights down a little bit, or is this cool? Yeah, lights down a little bit, maybe.
It depends on what they need to do.
What is that going to work for you, Lexi?
Yeah, it's just there's one that is darker.
It's okay.
Keep it?
I was just concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm
So
saying. Whatever you need to do.
As you all saw in the emails leading up to the week, we're going to really focus on what we would say there are five revenue streams in the nonprofit sector. And really the only, I really think the sixth might be, you can make a case for fee for service. But we're not really going to focus on that as part of this. We do feel like one of these 5 buckets, if not all, and by the way, this slide deck will be available to all y'all. So happy to send this out. Don't feel like you have to write everything down on this. But so just a real quick definition, and then we'll get into a little bit more as we go along. So of course, major donors, individual giving. Some people could say this could be 2 different categories, but basically we're talking about people who give to your organization, individual people at various levels. That's kind of what we're talking about right there. And a major donor to every organization is at a different amount. There are some organizations where $500 is a major donor, and there's some organizations where $500,000 is a major donor. It's all across the board. And it's not about comparing. We're not sizing anybody up. We're just saying we're just talking about people, building relationships. Social enterprise, some of you already know about this. And it's an opportunity to create a business model that is for charity or for the good. There's probably a better definition that our social enterprise person will talk about. Grants. I think we all know what grants are about. They vary in size and shape from federal, very complicated, all the way down, right, Anna? All the way down to a simple corporate like a bank kind of thing. And that's a crazy world. Real quick, how many of you all, when you started your current position, knew that fundraising was going to be part of your role? And how many of you, when you started your position, felt prepared to be in a fundraising capacity. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
a lot of you are relying on God on that one,
it's
right?
crazy. I mean, nonprofits, and many times you look at these job descriptions as a leader, and it's like, we want you to do this, this, and this, and raise money, and be expert in social media, and love all people all the time, and so on and so forth. So,
I remember my first role at Fresno Mission, and they gave me the job description, and literally, I laughed. I said, are you kidding? I know a lot of people, but I have no idea who would ever be equipped to fill this role, because this is crazy stuff. He goes, no, I think you're the guy. I'm like, I don't think so. I think you're the one, you got the wrong person. Anyway.
So moving from grants into contracts, and again, you'll have the opportunity to decide if you want to learn a little bit more about these. And contracts are much more obviously different than grants, and that those are a relationship, a contractual relationship you will have with another organization or a funding type for a service that you do. One of my clients is United Cerebral Palsy of Central California. Mm-hmm. They have multiple contracts with people that fund them so that they can go out and provide services for people with disabilities, adult people with disabilities. Those are very specific contracts that they write, they renew, they review, they evaluate, they assess. It's very different than a grant. A grant is saying, we do this work, and grantor, you're going to believe in us to do this work, and therefore we're going to fund you, and then we're going to prepare a report at the end of the day, and hopefully you'll be happy with it. Very, very few times does a grantor say, you failed, we want our money back. They might say, we might not refund you, but that's kind of a differentiator. And then last but not least, the good old world of events. And I'm sure many of your board members have called you and said, hey, have you guys considered doing a fill in the blank, right? Golf tournament, bake sale, fireworks stand, all banquet, all that stuff. And I get the pleasure of leading that group today. So with that, we're going to have, we're going to come back to this. And before we do that, we're going to really get into some of the dynamics of this whole redemptive relationship building.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And Dan, feel free, if there's a comment you want to make and pipe in, please feel free to do that. So wanted to talk about the really the redemptive heart behind fundraising and what we do. I think of one thing, and that is we are all broken people, and all the donors that we work with are the same. So there's not much difference. There's some broken people in this world, and our mission is to help them get on mission with us and help them and serve them. So that redemptive mentality really is the heart of what we do when we're working with people and individuals in raising funding, but it's that relationship piece. One, how do we cultivate it? Really, it's mutual benefit, mutual respect, mutual trust. And I'm going to kind of blow through some things because I really want to be able to get to the heart of some of what is in this piece. So it's loving and caring for people like Jesus has called us to is what the key to the redemptive, transformative relationships that we're looking for. We're called to disciple people, all of us, whether it be in our specific ministries or whether it be those that are giving to our cause. It's discipling people. That's what we do. Caring more about the heart of people than sometimes even our own mission. Trust me, there's a lot of times where I get this wrong. I wish I could say, man, I've got every one of these relationships down pat and it's great. And there are times where I walk away and I go, man, I just kind of blew that. I wish I could do a redo. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that I've been able to connect with through the years that I have lifelong and will have lifelong relationships with. And it's powerful to be a part of that. So let's talk about the redemptive approach to fundraising. We need to treasure our investors, and we need to help them become heavenly treasure investors. I think of the book, and I brought a copy of it, The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. It really gives you a perspective of this treasure mentality of what we're trying to do, People that have a lot of wealth, and I'll get to that in the later point, but people that have a lot of wealth, where is their treasure? Is it all about their stuff? Or is it about what they're making a difference in doing for kingdom perspective? Craig Blomberg states in the New American Commentary on Matthew, in this context, storing up treasure focuses particularly on the compassionate use of material resources to meet others' physical and spiritual needs in keeping with the priorities of God's kingdom. It's the priorities of God's kingdom, and keeping that perspective is so many times the key. I would encourage you all to pick up the book, The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. It'll give you great perspective in how we need to think about the fundraising space. Are we building partners in kingdom mission? We're called to disciple and our financial partners. And in one, whether it be pray for our partners, pray over the emails or the requests that we send. There's many times where I just did it last night. I'm about to send a text to a guy, and I'm like, I put down my phone, I'm almost ready to send the text, and I put down my phone and I just go, Lord, I just pray that when this text message goes out, he's in a state that when he receives it, God's gonna do something powerful right here in this. Because the request that I made last night was for a couple different things. And I'm anxious. I hope that sometime this morning I'll be able to report on what he said. But it's having that spiritual emphasis. So called to disciple partners. There's one story that comes to mind, and it was a guy that was. I knew his capability. I knew who he was prior to walking away from God, and I knew what he was accomplishing back then in the day. I didn't know him really well, but when I first saw him and met him, I was like, I've known this guy. He's made a big difference in the world, but he has gone off the rails in the last 10 years. So when I ended up meeting him again, we started connecting, and God started stirring in my heart just to say, you know what? What I knew of what his giving was at the time was probably $10,000 a year that he was giving to certain things. I knew his capacity. I knew his heart. And I was like, man, but this guy's off the rails. The divorce is going to be going through. The people that he's hanging with are the wrong people. The women that he's reconnecting with are just the wrong women. Like, this is not the guy that I want to be, And I always think about that passage. God is happier about the one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander away. Dude, this was one of the one sheep that was wandering away, and we need to go find this guy. We need to bring him back into the herd, right? So, into the flock. So anyway, this guy, I ended up saying, you know what? I remember where I was. I was at Denny's in Jensen in 99, and I looked across the table from him, and I says, you know what I want to do? I want to take you on a spiritual retreat. I want to take you to Haiti with me with Convoy of Hope. And we're going to go, and then we're going to come back. And the greatest part for me as a youth pastor, right, is always the trips. Dude, if I could get 4 or 5 hours of time in the car with a kid, man, that's gold. and so I always looked at that, and I says, if I can get time with this guy, because I know he drinks and stuff, I don't. But I was like, hey, if I can get him on this plane, hey, dude, I got all this time. We can do some traveling around Haiti. I got all this time. We can sit in the bar at night. We got time. We got the hotel time. We got time back. It's going to be awesome. Well, this is what he says to me, Brent, I don't just want to go to Haiti. I want to go to El Salvador, too. I want to see another one of your countries while we're doing this. If I'm going to go with you, then I want more. And well, you got it. I'll put it together. And I was new at Convoy, so I'm asking tough questions of my staff, going, hey guys, can I be gone for like a week? I just started. I'm going to travel around the world with this guy. So anyway, they say yes. And it was just it was incredible time. What ended up happening is one of the leaders that worked for Convoy of Hope had gone through a divorce 11 years before. Her husband did not want to do ministry with her. Right now, they're married and they're doing ministry in El Salvador. As of a couple weeks ago, they've shipped 23 containers of food, supply, resources into El Salvador. Hundreds of people have come to Christ because of their work in El Salvador. And like, that's the heart. Now, what does his giving look like? It's probably $200,000 a year now. It's not 10, but, and he's been a big part of my life and all that's going on in my world. So it's a powerful opportunity to say, how can we invest in people? And he's grateful for all that God has done. So how do we relate to major donors? Be observant in offices or conversations. When you see a picture of their family, ask about the family. Get to know who these people are. It's not about walking in and just saying, hey, let's get to business, but trying to be observant, and we're trying to respect time at the same time. So it's this big balancing act that we have to always do when we're connecting with people that are busy. But it's getting to know the heart of who they are. Observe their awards, their objects, their art. Ask business questions sometime. Get to know their world. What do you love about your business? What does retirement look like? I had one guy ask that question. We're now talking to him about transferring 25% of his company, of his $25 million company, into the foundation because he didn't want to pay the taxes. All which would benefit each of you. Take good notes. Send good notes. Those good notes are going to help you when you go back into those later appointments to be able to reflect on some things that you want to reflect on. The last part here is ask good questions about them. What are the organizations? I love some of these questions, but there they are. What are the organizations? I love asking this question. It's sometimes a painful question to me because I have to do what the Lord's telling me to do. But what are the organizations you love to give to? You know what that does? It gives you such an incredible heart into the person. You know what they love to give you. You know where their heart's at. You know what their passions are. Like now from there, you just have to pray and go, Lord, how do I use all that information? Because I'll usually go home and just my mind will blow, and I'll just go, man, how do I help them get connected into our mission in light of what they just shared with me that they're investing in other missions? Because people have a lot of wealth, and typically every person gives to about 7 different ministries or organizations. It's not just your donor. It's a kingdom person. It's a child of God. And that's powerful. What affords you the opportunity to be generous? I love this question. This is such a great question. Because they're going, well, I've got 3 companies. I do X, Y, Z. Or I just received an inheritance of $12 million. Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry. Like, that's painful. What campaigns have you been excited about over the years? That's another fun question because it kind of points to where their heart is, and then it gives you perspective on what they like to give to and how much they usually give to their certain things, and it just gives you a lot of perspective. But it really helps getting to know these people and understanding their heart, their mission, their values, the core of who they are. Friends, this is redemptive work. So like I said, the normal family gives to 7 different organizations. And at times, are we helping them give to the things that they're passionate about? If we did that every day to every one of our donors and asked them, what do you love to give to and how can I help you do it? It would change the game for some of those people, but it would change the game for some of our organizations.
Yeah. So a couple of things before that, before the kind of the next section for Brent on this point. One is in thinking about this redemptive language, and redemptive, just like you think, well, what's the difference between what Brent's saying and just going and asking people for money, right? And really a couple points. One is what we're really trying to talk about is how to get to the donors' hearts. Because getting to a donor's wallet or bank account is pretty easy. I mean, you really throw a little compassion, throw a little story out there. We used to joke at Valley Children and say, just show a bald baby and, kind of thing.
People write the check.
I mean, it's kind of, it's a little dark. I apologize, but but what I want to know, would you rather have the money or the heart? And
That's
it's a
right.
tough one. Don't be so quick to answer because you think if I said today, I'll write you a $5,000 check. but I might be a real jerk to your organization,
It's
or
not
I
worth
might
it.
not represent the heart
Yeah.
or I might come in and say, hey, I'm a big donor, EMP. So now what I want you to do
Right.
is
Yeah.
I'd like for you to start sending buses to somewhere. Well, that's donor control. So you kind of have to kind of work with that tension a little bit. So that's kind of the first thing on that. And the second thing, these are not your donors.
Yeah.
And that to me is a real huge part of this when we come together as nonprofits. And
Yeah.
I know there's sometimes like, well, why do they have this donor and they have that donor? And there's a little bit of jealousy that comes with that. And I think if we're going to really go all in on this redemptive language, I think we have to kind of come to a sense of humility of going, you know what? God's going to do what God's going to do. Do I have time for the quick?
Can I? Well,
Yeah, go ahead. Go. You
No,
go.
no.
You go. You go.
Are you good?
Yeah. Yep. You're on.
Okay. Here it is. That's the deal with working together. It's fun. Collectively, thank you, Randy, for this part. Collectively on your applications, we asked, give us a snapshot of your budgets, right? Do you remember that? You probably don't even remember that. You put that on there. Yeah. Thanks, Vana. So you did. And so collectively, your budget numbers on the conservative side is $4.5 million represented in this room right here. Collectively. Okay? $4.5 million we've got to raise every year collectively to do the things that you guys are going to do to fulfill your mission and calling. Okay? You probably won't forget this part. What if I told you that out of your donors that give to you, they have the capacity to give $10 million away a year, collectively? Because I'm telling you, from everything and all the experience that I've seen, they do. But what are we doing? A lot of the times we go, these are my donors. These are my donors. But what if I ask the question, like I did earlier, of saying, what do you love to give to? And they said, you know, back in the day, we adopted a foster youth. And now they're aged out and they need a place to stay. And I would go, man, I've got a ministry over here that I could connect you with in Joe and Vanessa that, man, I'm telling you, they would love you right now. Now, I'm not reading into that a lot, but I just thought I would say that. It may be that they love community development, you know, and they may love, you know, they've got gang members that have been, like, they love, they've had some serious issues in their family, need counseling and therapy work. Like, the opportunity is significant. Well, what if I told you that collectively, 10 million of those dollars, they have the capacity to give that, but we're not connecting the dots and asking for it?
When I worked at Fresno State, I went on a funding call with, at the time, was a pretty large prospective donor for Fresno State, for the university. And in a rare occasion, my vice president, again, Fresno State's big, so we have a lot of levels of stuff, asked to go on the meeting with me. And I'm like, okay.
Yes.
And it was just, he just was curious.
Yes.
And he wanted kind of a piece of this donor. And
Redemptive. That's redemptive.
Yeah.
You found out that he wanted a piece?
Yeah. So we went on this lunch, and during the lunch, I said to this donor, I said, I really don't care if you give to Fresno State. I care that you give somewhere to something you care about. And I looked over, and my vice president was not happy. He was really not happy. So
Fired.
So we're in the car on the way home, and I did think, oh, I'm going to pay for this one. And he said to me, he said, you know, I've been doing development for a long time. I've worked with a lot of different people. I've never had a development person say something like that to a donor. And I thought, okay. And he said, that was actually, I really thought about it. He goes, that was really neat. I don't know if he used the word neat, but he was really okay with it. And he said, it made me stop and think that you really want to get to know him. And so for me, that's kind of a memory of that idea of it's all about relationship.
That's right. And the final thing that I'll share to this is not only do they have the capacity to give $10 million, but you know what? they probably have the capacity to give 40 million through their wills and trusts. And at their death, this is another point, they're probably going to be giving about 40 million to their kids. Do you know their kids? Are we asking those kind of questions? It's fun because we just got, recently, one of our families, third generation, the kid's 20 years old. The dad calls me, he goes, "Hey Brent, my son was asking about our giving account and our donor advised fund. My son wants to start one, he's 20. Can you send us an application?" And I'm like, third generation. That's huge. So anyway, I conclude with that.
Yeah. You're back.
Oh, I am back.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks, Dan. That was a nice transition.
Great. You like that?
That was perfect. This whole ATM, how can we stop treating our donors like ATM machines? I asked one donor one time, and he's a partner of ours, and this was before the foundation, and I was helping with grants and stuff, and I went to coffee with him, and in that moment, I walked in the door, and I had a feeling that what I was feeling of all the requests coming into me at the time was he was probably feeling the same way. So I sit down for coffee, and the first thing I ask him, I said, "Hey," and I sit down and I go, "So," and I just sat because I was exhausted. It was like 3rd of December. I go, "Do you feel like an ATM machine today, or do you feel like you're changing the world?" And he sat there, and he goes, "I was just talking to my wife about that this morning."
Oops.
We go back to, how do we care and love people? How do we disciple people? And these donors are relationships. These donors are hurting. They need people to love them just like we love the people in our own ministries. We think of these at the time as ATM machines. We have to reverse the thinking on this. These are my donors. These are not your donors. That's selfishness, right? I thought that was a sin, but I don't know, maybe not. We are the greatest at what we do, and we're amazing at it. Our organization is the only thing that is going on in town. Well, that's pride, and I think I checked that's a sin too. The third thing, I want all their generosity. Gosh, if they would just write that $300,000 check, I know that they have the capacity to give $300,000 a year. Gosh, if they would just give it all to us, that would be awesome. Right? Well, I heard that greed's a sin. And so how do we help our donors and those that we're connecting with fulfill their mission? How do we help welcome them into our mission, which is helping them fulfill their mission? And man, God's going to do some incredible things, and now we are building trust and building relationship that'll last a lifetime. So the next question that we have is what narratives do we use with donors to avoid desperation appeals? So I've got a few. I've heard some in this community. I wanted to choke some people. And I kind of did. What I do, when I want someone to change something, you know what I typically do is when I want to say to someone, I said, "You know what? That was the dumbest," in my mind, I'm thinking, that is the dumbest thing you could ever do. And so what I tell people is I'll go, "You know what? I think what your mission is of your organization is incredible, but I'm going to give you permission right now to never do that again." Like, I'm going to give you permission to never say that again, to never come across with this mentality that is just so wrong. If you don't give, we're going to close our doors. You know, that's a good one. If you don't give, we're going to close our doors. We're going to shut down. We're not going to be able to make it. So how do we do that differently? I'm just going to let you know, man. Well, so if you don't give, our PG&E is going to get turned off. Wait. Isn't our mission to be connected into a relationship with Jesus? in such a way that we're relying on everything that we've got to do what he's calling us to do. Pray at that moment when you're thinking, I don't know how we're going to do this. And check our own hearts. And come back and say, Lord, I know you've called me to this mission. I know you've given me the calling to do what you've called me to do. How do I present this differently so we're not manipulating people, but this is more of a mission to help donors fulfill the vision that you're called to fulfill? Prepare your presentation with a vision message that you own and that you know. Care more about the spiritual kingdom mission of the person. We'd say something like this. We are in a position to expand our reach in these areas, and we would love to have you prayerfully consider joining us right now at this momentous time for us to do what God's calling us to do. Even though in the back of your mind, you're screaming because you're freaking out, wondering how in the world you're going to make it. But also, report with transparency, report with integrity, and report accurate fundraising numbers. Report the impact of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a conversation you just had yesterday that was a mind blower because God put it together. But we got to change that. We got to really be emotionally intelligent in those moments when our emotions are screaming at us. And the reality is that God has called us to this mission that we've got to fulfill. And we can't stop. But we've got to be smart and do what God's calling us to do.
And I would also say, don't be afraid to ask input from your donors and your relationships. Ask them for feedback. Do surveys with them.
Yes.
How are we doing?
That's good.
Are we, and be open to your own self-criticism, because sometimes I think we are our own heroes. And I know this is so obvious, and you've all heard it in the storytelling sessions, but keep making the donors the heroes, not you.
Yes.
It's so easy as nonprofit people to think we're saving the world one adopted kid at a time, or one this or one that. Yeah. But the donor, make the donors the center, the heroes of the story as much as you can in that. At the end of the day, it's really just about their engagement. I think I have time for this quick one. I told Brent this story. It's, again, working at Fresno State, and I started this alumni group up in Seattle. We had realized at the time we had a bunch of people that left Fresno and started working at Microsoft. So we started this alumni engagement group up there. We ended up having like 50, 60 people who wanted to stay in touch with what was going on in Fresno State. So in a series of research, I found this guy who was like a VP at Wells Fargo. I call him. He totally ghosts me. I call him again. He ghosts me. I call his secretary, and I know what's happening. So I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do it one more time. Somehow or another, I call. He picks up the phone. He does not. He thinks it's somebody else. It's me. I say, this is Dan Kimball from Fresno State. I'm coming up to Seattle. I'd love to visit you. He right away says, I'm not interested in giving money to Fresno State. I graduated years ago. I haven't heard from anybody. I go, I'm not coming to ask you for money. I just want to come and I want to meet you. I want to hear your story. He said, well, he's paused. He says, yes. He says, however, don't ask me for money. I'm like, fine. Okay, fine. I won't ask you for money.
I love it.
He says, you got 15 minutes. So I set the appointment. I showed up to this guy's office like 30 minutes ahead of time.
Of course
I'm not going to screw this up. I'm waiting in the waiting room. He invites me in. He looks at me and says, I'm not interested in giving. So whatever materials you have, I'm not interested. I'm like, fine, great. So I sit down and start talking to him. 5 minutes. Tell me your story. How'd you get to Seattle? How'd you get into this business? How'd you go from an ag major to a finance guy, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking around his office while I'm talking, and I notice a series of things. He's very interested in wine. He's got wine bottles. He's got wine awards. He's got winery things. And I said, gosh, I noticed you really like the wine industry. I know it's really popular up here. he starts talking about wine for like 10 minutes. So did you know that Fresno State actually has one of the largest phenology programs in the country for college students? Like no other university is producing wine like Fresno State. Yeah, I had no idea. They weren't doing that when I was there. So suddenly we get in a, now remember he told me 15 minutes and now we're on 25, 30, 35, 45 minutes talking about wine, which led to his kids, which led to his life, which led to some challenges. An hour and 15 minutes later, I said, I feel like I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you so much. And by the way, did I ask him for money? No. Went back from this trip, got back to Fresno State, and I sent him a thank you note, and I sent him 4 bottles of Fresno State wine as a thank you, like a little mini case of wine. 3 weeks later, I kid you not, there's a check in the mail for $1,000. And he said, I know you didn't ask me for money, but I really enjoyed how much you got to know me. So for me, that's always been like kind of an example of how you can approach. So
It's a win. That's awesome.
So with that, ask yourself the question, do you believe money will solve your organization's most pressing problems?
Yes.
Okay? No, it's very honest. Yes. Yes.
Most pressing problem.
Most pressing problems.
We can
Yes.
fire some
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
Well done, Vana. Yep, got that.
Yeah. Not always. Not always.
wait a
I mean, if you look at the other weeks of things that we've been doing in this session, in these sessions about leadership, about board work. I mean, if you have a dysfunctional board, if you've got tension within the org, if you have mission drift, we've talked about that somewhat. If suddenly you're changing, who you are so you can stay up with the people next door or whatever, not always. And so what we want to do is lead into kind of we'll start to wrap up the donor stuff and lead into what we're going to talk about the second half, which is how diversified are your revenue streams, which is hence the very opening. And the way to think about that, again, going back to what we talked about, much like when you do a SWOT, the old-fashioned SWOT thing, I think it's really healthy from time to time to do a SWOT, but a revenue version of it. What are your streams of revenue? Every nickel and dime that's coming to your organization, how is it coming? And just simply ask yourself the question, how diverse it? It's not unlike a portfolio, your own personal, household portfolio or an investment portfolio. You want diversity as much as you can. Now, I say that very cautiously in that we do not expect every organization to suddenly be involved in all these areas that we're talking about. But if there's opportunities, in other words, if you can grow 1 or 2% or 3% in 1 or 2 areas, that's 3 or 4 or 5, 6% more revenue that's going to come in later in the year. Yeah. So, so what we want to do is in all the chaos of running your programs, running a board, returning emails, returning Redemptive Lab stuff from Randy, saying, all right, I'll get to it, all that stuff, spending time with donors, that phone call where the donors just, or that person's just rambling on and on, you're like, I got to go, where can you diversify a little bit? And so that's what we're going to challenge you in the second half by breaking into these groups. And again, I don't know the process for you, what group you picked, but hopefully it's to stretch you, not something that you know well. I know events really, really well, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I always, that's a go-to for me, but I need to learn more on contracts personally, and as I work with nonprofits or whatever.
And Dan, this is not a recommended split here.
No, 100%. No, this was a slide that I said, Ashley Goldsmith, make me a slide that looks like some diversity. So thank you for that clarification.
We would like a well-balanced organization, okay?
Yes.
And I would also say that I'm just going to put a plug in for the 10 Talents Foundation and some of what we do and some of how we think. Our organization, what we really, our heart is that we want to bring in greater asset-based giving into the foundation, and through your ministries and through the people that you know, asset-based giving is helping. They're saying statistically that organizations grow 6 times faster when we're bringing in assets other than cash, and that's what mainly we're asking for. So this split, I would like to see if we could have a split here that says this is our asset-based gifts from some of our donors, because those elements are significant, because we can retain tax dollars and move tax dollars back into your organizations through that. So that's just a little 10
So
talents.
not recommended. Go ahead.
Yeah, so asset based, so this is like people are donating property, they're
Correct.
donating.
Stocks.
Appreciated assets, crops. We've done a lot of crop gifting. A lot of those different tools that are non-cash. of
Selling
which-
businesses. People will sell business. Okay. We're going to whip through about 2 or 3 more points on additional tips and tools, and then we're going to introduce our sessions, and then we'll have a break. So, Brent?
Awesome. So characteristics of effective campaigns. I guess one question I had for each of you was when I say the word campaign, what do you guys think about? Like, just give me some insight into what. Wow, that's good. Yeah, campaign. Like, what would be a campaign?
Thing that you're trying to raise funds for, like a building
Okay.
campaign.
Yeah. Okay. A phone-a-thon campaign. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Giant wall thermometer.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Crowdfunding. Yeah, there's another one. Campaign, right? A thank you campaign. I've been a part of thank you campaigns. You know, how many people can we connect with? Kind of stuff. Other campaigns? Other ideas on that?
I think of Sarah McLaughlin.
Yeah. Sad dog behind the.
Well done. Maybe we should do that here, right? We should pull something like that off here. So, exploitative, right? So when we think of campaigns, really the mission is that we need to be realistic in our goals and expectations. I was just speaking to a church board last night, and it opened the door to not only what the foundation does, asset-based giving, but gosh, this morning my phone's been blowing up from the pastor now and from another board member talking about, hey, we're getting ready to start a $2.5 million campaign. How do we need to think about that? You know, and so we're in that conversation right now. So, but setting guidelines and expectations. So the pastor comes in with me this morning with certain numbers, and I'm like, bro, go back to work. go try to figure out these numbers, get them a little more clearer. You know, you're going to need to clarify the numbers, and then you're going to have to understand what the expectations are for your board and your staff. So I think the big piece there, be realistic with your goals and expectations. Be intentional about building deep partnerships and relationships. Know your people. Know the people that you're working with. In what are you expecting, and what is the capacity of your organization? You know, a lot of organizations, when they hire consultants, and from a lot of them now, because of back east, they're bringing people into the valley. A lot of the people coming in from back east don't understand our valley. Oh man, it's just unbelievable. But then they're encouraging these feasibility studies that I don't think they're taking to the next level. You have to realize that this valley, we know people. We know people, and we know a lot of capacity of what these people have. But knowing our people and knowing how to build those relationships is super, super important.
Does everybody understand a feasibility study terminology? Is that foreign?
Good question.
So feasibility study.
Okay, great.
Many
Thank
times
you.
when people do capital campaigns and they bring in a consultant, whether locally or larger, feasibility study, they'll come in and they're basically going to say, do you as an organization have the capacity, meaning the people and the donor base,
to raise it.
And is the community excited enough about what you do to fund your project? That's what they do. And then basically they'll start with your database. They'll survey out, depending on the size of your org, they'll survey out anywhere between 15 to 50 donors. They'll call them, they'll meet with them. They'll say, how do you feel about ENP overall? And they'll say, oh, I love it. And they'll say, would you be willing to make a significant gift? They'll come back to the org and say, here's a report. We believe that you do, in fact, or in some cases, I've actually encouraged a few orgs, because I've done a few. I said, you're not ready. You've got some work to do. So that's That's how that works. I just want to make sure everybody's kind of clear on that terminology on that.
So, yes, and the other part of that feasibility study piece real quick is that it's understanding the capacity of, thank you. It's understanding the capacity of the organization, the leadership of the organization even, it's, what do our donors in our valley think about the organization as a whole? Is it pretty positive? Is it really, really positive? Is it not so positive? There's been some campaigns that have not gone well because they just weren't ready. And that feasibility study really kind of opens the door to a lot of that. But also, I would say that some of those feasibility studies don't take it to a deep enough level of helping understand things. Be intentional about building deep partnerships. These are, I talked with a pastor one time, and he's about ready to do this campaign. And they're looking at a $6.5 million campaign. So I'm having a conversation with the pastor. I said, well, did the organization come in and ask enough good questions of you? Like, who are some of the key people that you could be bringing into this inner circle of partnership? That's not just for this campaign, but that's future. So he starts talking to me about some of these different people. And he comes in with one, and he says, this guy, he goes, Brent, they don't give a lot, but they're super awesome people. But you know what I just heard? They just received $12 million as inheritance money. That was never discovered through the feasibility. It was never even mentioned. It was never even talked about. And he just goes, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just asked me some of those questions because you just opened another door for me that I just never even ever got to. And so we just need to ask really good questions. Building those deep partnerships for the lifetime. Campaigns take a great amount of time. Work backward and plan for it. And it could be hiring consultants to help you with those campaigns. That's definitely an option.
So, on this next point,
Yes.
consider how, and I'm going to say how grants, contracts, or social enterprise fit into your organization. And really, you could say this about events as well, which is, do you have the people? Do you have the capacity? And does your program fit or need that type of, in other words, you hear about, oh, there's grant money out there. We're going to go for it. And you've never considered, well, we got to hire somebody to run it. We got to manage it. We don't have that. We're not a right program. So again, it kind of falls in that line of just don't follow the money, but ask yourself the question: is this a good fit for us right now? Are we an organization that's ready for a grant relationship or a contract relationship? And hopefully, if this question is in your mind, you'll go to a group today, and our experts, like who we're going to introduce in just a minute, will do that. So that's just kind of as we lead into the break and sessions, be thinking about in your head. Don't just jump because it sounds really cool. You heard there's money out there. And lastly,
have materials on hand that are going to help your partners understand what you're up to and what you're doing. This is just a sample of ours. We've done a number of these for different organizations through some of our consulting stuff, but keep your mission, vision, values just really at the core of what you're doing. But we wanted to, when I was at the mission, we had the opportunity to create this. And I tell you, on the back of this, we ended up listing out some of our needs as a document. So I had a friend of mine help me craft you. It talked about how to get involved. And the how to get involved section listed out different options that people could be a part of. I ended up raising $700,000 in like 7 months because of this document. And I was like, wow, I had no idea that I would be able to get that kind of traction. But what it did is it created this credibility. We were clear and transparent on what our budget looked like, our ongoing impact, what different things look like, and how we were able to present ourselves to donors and to people.
And we're not saying that 10 Talents one sheet is the best in the world. It's just what we hope that we're saying is, can you present in a very simple format? Like there's a couple organizations here locally that I've get stuff too. I think Andrew, you know this story, but every year, usually in around September, October, I donate to about 10 organizations, like $10, $15. Yeah, well, go ahead. Well, and what I do.
No, you don't want to know what his point is.
So what I do is then I've created this little spreadsheet, and I say how fast was I thanked, what was the response, what was the material I got, and so I do a little evaluation of the materials, and then do they respond when I ask a question? When I say please take me off your mailing list, how quickly do they do that? And then I collect all this stuff, and then I use it for presentations to orgs carefully. So it's really an interesting thing. Like, how hard was it to donate? Did I have to click 5 times? Like, I have all these series of things that can be really interesting. So feel free to ask me, and I'll donate $10.
So again, keep it clean and simple. We gave you that, use pitch decks, use videos, use the tools that we have. The one thing that I would say that at events that has been so powerful for me, and it was through Convoy of Hope, they did it so well. They ended up bringing in in the way of building confidence in your organization, they brought in a business owner. His CFO went into the organization, vetted the organization from a financial perspective, and came in. What helped you provide the information to write that check? And he goes, if that donor over there was able to send a CFO in and ask all the questions they needed to ask, and it was a 3-month kind of internal check, he goes, if he can do that and give us the credibility, man, I can write this check. So having our board members, having our treasurers of our organizations be able to share with credibility, the credibility of the financial side of the organization, I think your generosity will hit even more. So, but it's using these tools as a part of the tables and helping people really articulate and clearly know kind of where our mission is and what's going on. And an impact report. So,
great. Any like burning questions, we'll come back after the break, get our groups, then we'll come back after the group so we can probably deal with some questions. Any like last, like I had to ask this, totally crazy question or whatever. Okay. So what we're going to do now then is we're going to actually introduce a few of our speakers that you all don't know yet, and then we're going to go to break, and then we'll direct you to those groups. So I'm going to start, I'm going to say it again. So donors direct asks, that's again some of that individual donor type of strategies, relationship building with donors of all sizes and shapes. That's going to be with Brent. After the break, you'll go to the Oklahoma room 127, right across this hall. Grants will be with Corrine. I'm going to